How can a builder have a smooth, friction-free experience, with a truss company as they're starting out probably at either the quote or permit process and then working their way through everything that's involved in ending up with roof trusses on site and a roof on someone's new house or church or school or whatever the project happens to be. So I'm gonna ask you, Stan, to tell us a little bit about how that interaction begins with a salesperson and what kind of services do we provide, what kind of information might we need in order to get started?
Well, I think it starts before the plans are drawn. I think it's very important that, and I know we have established relationships with architects and builders, but clear information on the plans is helpful right on down to the time we deliver. So any unanswered questions should be addressed with the specifier, architect, engineer. And oftentimes our contractor is a liaison there. So first of all, I've always said we read plans not only to find out what it tells us, but to determine what it doesn't tell us. Because there's generally something that's very pertinent to our operation left off of the detail. Mm-hmm. So that to me is the first step. The next step is really simple, but often overlooked details like where is that job site?
And that could be important.
Yeah, and somebody says, well, it's in Lacey, right by the 7-Eleven there. And but give me an address, and then let us determine the accessibility of the job.
Yeah.
I know when William wants to send a truck out, it's kind of nice to be able to get into the job site, be aware of any obstacles, power lines, sewers underneath the ground that we shouldn't drive over, all kinds of little details like that. So that's where we would start, and then a clear conversation with the contractor about the features that are available. Sometimes things aren't drawn, but hey, there was an assumption made as to our limitations of our product that don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
The ridge on a vaulted truss does not need to line up with the ridge on the roof. But that has been kind of understood. So that you and I have talked, Chad, about the importance of the new energy code and how that's going to affect, even though it may be an older set of plans, there may be new criteria that we need to be aware of that has to do with where the mechanical units are located. Mm-hmm. And so that's a beginning.
Yeah, excellent. So the customer has gotten together with the architect, they've drawn plans, they hopefully have the information that we need. When we receive those plans, what is our process here to get started on getting the client a quote? And what sort of things can we do for the client once we have the set of plans?
Well, first again, we can talk to them about features that aren't included, but beyond that, it goes to our design department that does preliminary designs. Those aren't always detailed designs, but they're enough information to get that through the process to get a meaningful information to determine what the price is. We've gone so far as on large projects to just design part of the building if it's a very large project, and say, well, this is how much it is for this area, and then multiply it out. So that expedites the bid process. Everybody wants a number in a hurry. The more we know, the better off we are in terms of dialing down what our actual costs are. So after the bid is complete, they look at our price and decide that they would like to go with us. Then it goes into a final design process where we get down to the nitty-gritty on every little detail, and at times, not always needed, but at times go do a site measure. And here's a point I would really love to emphasize. Our site measure, in fact, I'm trying to change that terminology from site measure to site verification. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be out all by ourselves pulling a tape on a foundation without someone who is there to help us determine what happens beyond that dimension that's apparent at that point.
Right.
So we want someone, if that's the general contractor, that's fine. Oftentimes it is not. It may be a framer. If that's the case, we want contact information so that we can make a definite connection with that person and have them present to confirm and help us with the findings we need.
You bet.
After that is done, it is ready then for William to make sawdust in the morning or afternoon, and then put it back together.
Yeah. So before we jump into talking about making sawdust and going on from that point, as much as we'd like to have plans that are complete, have the information that's necessary, it's pretty typical that we get plans that don't have all the information. So can you share, I know you talked about the site address.
Right.
That's one that's oftentimes missing. And in the builder's defense, sometimes they don't have an address before they get a permit.
Right.
But usually they probably at least know where the project is going, could
Right.
give us a lot number, a parcel, something like that. But what other sort of things, what would you say are some of the most common irregularities on plans, the things that we have to dig to find out? It slows the process down a little bit.
Right.
What are those things that are most commonly missing? And then how do we go about getting enough information to do that bid if it doesn't have enough on the plans already?
Well, I have emphasized to our salespeople and our designers is that while we sell an engineered precision product, that's not what our customers buy. Our customers buy a shape that goes on top of the walls that fit the expectation of their customer. However, with that said, we need those details. And one of the ones that's often overlooked is an exact dimension on the overhang of what happens past the wall. And in this day and age, with so many trusses, where it's not just a piece of the top cord or rafter portion of the truss going past the wall, it's part of the truss. And how deep does that particular member have to be? How far past does it go? What kind of fascia material are you using? What kind of soffit treatment is there? That's all pertinent to the shape that we provide. Beyond that, then, we want to ask, is there mechanical loads in this particular roof? We see that, again, with the energy code being what it is. More and more people are putting furnaces, and a bad idea, water heaters. I hope not in the roof, but they are putting mechanical units, furnaces, air handlers, whatnot, in the roof. So we would like to provide space and a structure that is capable of carrying the load that's introduced. Generally, that's not a high-cost item. Mm-hmm. It is just a high-cost item if we have to solve it after the fact.
Right.
And you and I mentioned, and some municipalities are requiring, that we accommodate future solar load. And that's not heavy. Typically, we have a 7 pound per square foot top cord dead load. That may increase by 3 to 5 pounds, depending on what the engineer specifies. We need to know that up front. And sometimes they're not covering the whole roof, but let's not skimp on 3 pounds on part of the roof and worry about it later when they decide to put it on a larger area.
Right. Yeah, and as you mentioned, as I understand it, most of the times those small loads, the furnace in the attic it's often accounted for in the weight that the trusses are designed with, but it can be a problem with the inspection process if it's not clearly called out on the layout. And then with the solar load, it doesn't make much of a difference in the cost of a typical truss package, but it could result in actually having to do repairs on the trusses after the fact if we didn't account for it, wouldn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So good information to know. And so the customer is usually going to be working with a salesperson. The designer is kind of in the background doing the design. And so what's the best way for the client to get the information to the people that need to know it, which eventually would be the designer?
Oh, we really don't want to forbid access to our design team from the customer. However, in order for efficiency, we would like as much upfront information so there isn't a lot of interruptions in that process. There is sometimes, all they have to change is this one little detail. That one little detail might affect 50 different designs, so the designer has to visit that particular component in the roof, and it takes 4 or 5 minutes, and 4 or 5 minutes times 50 pieces is, and then it increases the likelihood that one of those would be missed.
Right.
Which is a frustration for all concerned. I'd like to back up and talk a little bit about that mechanical access in the truss.
Yeah.
It's not just a matter of the capacity of the truss to carry it, but there has to be access to the mechanical unit for maintenance. Things like changing the filter in a furnace. Quite frankly, I'm glad I don't have to climb into my attic to change a filter, but that is going to be a thing in the future. And if we have room for the furnace, but sliding the filter out hits one of our members, that could be a problem too. So that enough access. And again, that is not an expensive item. If we know ahead of time, that's where it's going.
Yeah. So much doesn't cost much ahead of time.
Right.
Which means that it might cost a bit later.
Right.
Yeah.
And delays. That's the delays and interruptions for all concerned.
Right. So now we're at a point where we've got all the information. We've done a site verification with a person who has the knowledge and the ability to make the decisions. The salesperson and design team have prepared the project for operations, and now it's in your hands. And what happens then?
Can do that. So typically, I'll get a notification from sales team or someone that a customer has requested a job be delivered on a certain date. And so I look at that date and see where it fits into my next available. And here we use next available committed week because we give ourselves a little flexibility, because trying to pick a pinpoint a day 6 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now or however far our lead time is difficult because there's always fluctuations. So we give ourselves a little bit more room by saying the week of. It works for the client and it works for us so that we can build our schedule to be the most effective and for both parties. And so typically I'll do that. I'll get that request, and then you know, if you're the builder, you're the one in charge, you'll get an email that says, here's your committed delivery week. And then we try everything we can to get your requested date. It may not hit the date you wanted exactly, but we're going to get as close as we can. Then as we get closer, we make phone calls about 2 weeks out from that committed. We verify, are you still ready? If you're not, then we move it. So we really believe in good communication, because if we get clear communication, we're not building something and storing it. And we know when I have a hole in my schedule early on so that I can fit jobs in.
Right.
I want to be able to produce as quick as I can, effectively as I can, and be able to get everyone, all the clients, their jobs when they want them, and be able to improve that.
Yeah.
So we get the committed date, we get closer, we're finally getting closer to that 2 week point. We make the phone call, client says, yeah, I'm ready for trusses, and we look at our schedule, and then shortly after we verify, usually on Mondays and Tuesdays, we're making those phone calls for final verification, and then by Thursday we put together a schedule, so you'll see an email from our scheduling at Truss Components, a schedule at Truss Components email with your exact date.
Right.
2 days prior, shipping manager calls out and says, hey, we're going to be there at this particular time. Day of, driver's calling you, hey, we're on our way. So we communicate.
Right.
We
right.
try to be clear. So that kind of goes into the scheduling. But to go back a little bit further, in order for us to get it, we have to have it turned in a certain amount of time so we can produce it. Because we'd like to have our packages and trusses delivered, or built, sorry. I'd like them built 2 days prior so that they can be loaded. The 2 days, yeah. So your job goes out on Monday. We want to load it up on Friday, which means ideally we want it built on Thursday. We want it built 2 days prior. Gives shipping time to get everything loaded up, make sure everything is on the truck that's needed. In order for that to happen, all of the things have to be checked off.
Yeah. Let's talk about a couple things here, and let's start with what are some of the typical pitfalls that occur during scheduling? What do the people that schedule their projects well, and there isn't a whole lot of, we'll see, I'll just say it this way. It's easier for us to meet someone's schedule when we have good information. Yeah. So what does that look like for you when it doesn't go well, and what does it look like for you when it does go well?
So we'll start off with what doesn't go well. And go to the next. So when it doesn't go well, it's, yeah, I think I'll be ready. And so then we get closer. Oh, I might need to push this again. So I get that. And so getting the information, like, is your foundation in? Do you have your permit? All of those things, especially from a scheduling standpoint, is super crucial, because someone thinks they'll be ready. I think I'm going to get poured on this date. And so we call 2 weeks later, hey, did you get poured? Oh, no, they failed inspection. Something happened. You know, obviously failing inspections, that's kind of out of everyone's control. We try the best our ability to meet the needs there, and we move the jobs around when we need to. But yeah, those are some of the things that happen. Overly eager, hoping we can get the dates we want them, and because I think everyone wants their trusses exactly the date they want them. They don't want walls standing more than 1 or 2 days before they want their trusses up. And I get it. We don't want things exposed to the weather. However, it doesn't give us much flexibility when we have to move at the last minute.
Right.
So those are some things that can be challenging.
Would you say that the majority of the time we are able to get the client their trusses within a day of when they're looking for them?
I would say the majority of the time we're able to hit within a few days of when they want them.
Yeah.
So.
And so you talked a little bit about the foundation being poured, the permit being approved, different stages like that. Do you think that it might be some builders are concerned that we're going to be too busy to get their trusses on our schedule when they're going to need them, and so they're they're just hoping to get a spot in our schedule somewhere soon.
I would say that tends to be put me in your schedule, get me a spot, and then they move a lot. And from my perspective, I'd rather them just tell me when they want them and figure out the pathway back to when they're thinking and work back. When's your foundation? When you get your permit? When you get your foundation? When your lumber dropping? Which we around here call a critical path. When we have that information, we can get a lot closer to pinpointing the delivery date. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely a challenge there. But I don't feel like it's a challenge to meet everyone's needs if I know what those needs are ahead of time, realistically.
Right.
So if I know that we have to, meet everyone's needs and I've got a schedule that's full, I'll ramp up for that ahead of time. But when I don't know, or when I think I need to ramp up and then everything bumps out, then I've got employees standing around,
Right.
which we can't have either. So
Yeah. So describe to me an example of a process that does go well. We're not going to use anyone's names or anything like that, but just take me through the process of someone that does have a good idea of when they're going to need the product and how we're able to meet that, kind of from the start of the schedule until we deliver. What does that look like when we do have good information?
Well, typically it revolves around having a plan of when each subcontractor is going to be in there. So they know that they have the permit. They've given me those dates. They know when they have the foundation, and I get those dates. They know when the lumber's coming, and I get those dates. And so as we build that schedule, then we're able to fine-tune it towards the end. So, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I think in my previous line, when I was a salesperson and designer, I had a client, which I really enjoyed working with because he would come in, he would talk to me about what needed to happen, and then he'd be sitting on an email with a calendar that had all of the trades all the way listed, all the vendors listed, when it was due. If one thing changed, everyone got a new calendar. So, yes, things changed, but I got the communication directly from my client saying, hey, this needs to be changed well in advance so that I can make changes and still have room to get everyone else in.
Helped avoid the last minute surprises.
It really did, yeah.
More
I think
difficult to accommodate.
That's probably the most difficult thing last minute.
Yeah.
4 or 5 weeks from now, easy to remedy.
Yeah. So let's talk about now we've gone through the scheduling process. We've had fantastic communication. We started with a set of plans that had all the information that we needed. The designer quickly and efficiently got a very accurate quote. The site verification wasn't even necessary because it was built per the plans. The contractor knew when he was going to get his permit, his foundation, the framing start, and knew when he was going to be ready for trusses. And now it's delivery day. So what does delivery day look like? What can go well? What can go wrong? What can we do to prepare and just make sure that the delivery is smooth?
What can go wrong? A lot of things can go wrong. Site access is usually the biggest thing. Not having adequate information about our site access and showing up to a job site and we can't get the trusses into the job site.
This time of year, it isn't a real issue.
No.
We tend to forget about snow and mud.
Correct.
And so weather can be a huge factor in site access.
Absolutely.
It was great when we poured in October. Not so much when we're ready for trusses and Thanksgiving week.
Right.
So,
For sure. Yep,
Yeah.
definitely, there's different elements that we have to look out for. But I think what goes well is when we're making our phone calls, we're asking if we can get that information ahead of time, and we're asking, hey, what's our site access like? Anything we need to avoid?
Yeah.
From a contractor standpoint, they're on a lot of jobs. So the communication about looking around, hey, I wonder if that big truck with all those trusses and that crane are going to be able to get in here. Do I have power lines? Do I have a spot flat that I can set this crane up? So those are things that if we can get up front and ask, that makes delivery day. So everything going well, we got a perfect thing, and we have a perfect site, right? All underground power. We're on flat, hard pack, not sand. And we get to be right up next to the garage and perfect access. That would be ideal. So, yeah, that would be great. But, yeah, we have other things like we call the day of. Hey, we're coming out.
Right.
But, yeah, I think that would be the perfect day of having.
What do we do if we show up on a job site and let's say we've had good communication ahead of time? We know what the obstacles at the site are going to be, and we've determined that we are going to be able to get the truck in. And we show up and the lumber pack for the roof is in the middle of the driveway. What do we do at that point?
Well, we asked the framer very nicely if they could start moving the pack. Sometimes, and not very often, but once in a while, we're able to help assist with our crane if we can set up further out. We can't always do that because if we can't set up to be able to help strap and pick and move that out of the way, then they're going to have to move it by hand.
Right. Yeah, so obstacles like that when the truck shows up, pretty avoidable for the most part. And definitely can eat up a few hours of a crew's time and potentially end up in a charge for the crane being there on the site while we're not unloading. Okay, so we've had a truss delivery. Things went well on the truss delivery. What sort of things do we look out for after the truss delivery? What kind of things can we run into, and how can we smoothly take care of anything that arises?
Sometimes a truss gets broken. So there needs to be a repair to that particular truss. There again, pertinent information. In this day and age with digital photography, that is a huge help. But not just a general point and shoot, but what truss is that? What's the extent of the damage? So 2 or 3 pictures may be better than one. That, I think, is one thing that can go wrong. Sometimes a detail was missed in terms of a skylight or some access, and a framer takes it upon themselves to carve up a truss, thinking, well, they'll just fix that truss. Well, it's not what happens, because now you've introduced more load on the adjacent trusses, and it's not just a matter of fixing that one truss, but re-engineering after the fact the adjacent trusses, which could be very costly for the builder, and sometimes, if we're not notified in time, almost, not impossible. I've never seen an impossible, but a much more expensive solution.
Right.
So
I'm going to think about this from either the framer's perspective or the contractor's. And I've got a crew on site. I'm ready to roll trusses. Something is wrong. And my thought process might be, you know what? I've got all these guys here. I'm going to keep working, and we'll deal with it later. How long does it usually take from the time that we find out that something's wrong to have a remedy for whatever's wrong?
the sooner we know, the sooner we can get a remedy. And that sounds ridiculous, except that now the sooner we know, the more simple the remedy is, and therefore the quicker the remedy is. Sometimes, as I've described, you all this, blow and go, we call it. And I have a ton of respect for those people on the job who are just bent on getting that job done in a timely fashion. But they need to realize that even though it seems like they should just make a determination on themselves, it's much better for us, and we're responsive. We are very responsive in terms of solving that problem with them as soon as possible. So let us know, and we'll come to the site, see the situation. If needed, William is very good about getting a repair truss or trusses produced and out in short order.
Yeah.
So that's one of the responses that I think we need to know. Sooner is better.
Right.
Yeah, I would say so.
How often, as a percentage, would you say that if the framer designs their own repair on site so they can keep moving, the engineer accepts that repair?
Something about a snowball down south.
Yeah. I don't know if your experience is different than mine. I've not yet seen an engineer accept a field repair that was
In
done.
fact,
Yeah.
it's worse than just not accepting it. Now you have to undo that. And they said, well, shoot, I put all kinds of glue on there. Wouldn't that be better? Well, now in undoing, we cause more damage. And so it's worse than doing nothing.
Right.
Well,
right.
and then if we don't catch it, we might get the whole thing roofed, insulated, and then finally catch it, and that's going to be a major expense.
Yeah.
If we can catch that the day of, we might be able to get truss out to you the next day, get the repair out the very next day. It's just we're much better prepared to do that, and
Right.
we can do that. We will definitely do that. I know it's
Right.
difficult. I've had to go do repairs myself where I showed up 2 weeks after the fact, and they weren't the same repairs. So you were like, I need a different repair now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'd say also in my experience, a lot of times if I get a phone call, hey, this truss is an inch too long, or, something's going on that's making it not fit quite right. I can give the framer a pretty quick instruction to enable them to keep moving without creating something that's going to need to be undone.
Right.
So that it's all about the communication, isn't
Right.
it? That
all
quick phone
communication.
call, hey, something's not right. Rather than just working past it, I'm going to call right away and get someone involved. And I'd say, if you were asking me, the same would apply when something just isn't making sense. Maybe it's not wrong, but there's a lack of clarity in how to proceed. And the salesperson for the project, the designer for the project, they're likely going to have a pretty quick answer for whatever the confusion is. So yeah, the communication. I always appreciated getting a phone call from someone on site who was just not sure how something was supposed to go together. And usually it was because I didn't give them clear information, but I was able to remedy that.
And one of the
Phone
things
call.
we're attempting to do is to make our layouts clear enough so that it minimizes those questions. But, I'll be honest, sometimes there's a little bit of information that they could use that we haven't provided. But it's available to us. So if you call and say, hey, Truss TO6A, what goes on here? Well, I can look that up and I can, answer your question.
Right, right. Another thing that I've run into is, and I'd probably be guilty of this as well. It's like putting the tricycle together. You open up the box, you've got some screws and some tools and this paperwork that is of no use. You toss that to the side, and you get the tricycle put together. And I've been out on job sites a few times when there's a question, something's not quite right, and the layout was never pulled out of the delivery.
I'm
package.
glad you
So-
mentioned that because we've had some where had they looked at the picture, the issue would have never arose, but a week down the road, it's now a major issue. And had they just looked at, we had in fact provided the information, they didn't look at it.
Right. I'm trying to be delicate here, obviously. Our goal is to provide insights that will make a builder's or a framer's life easier. So it would be pretty easy to get onto a rant, and the reality is that, these guys out in the field know things that we don't. We're working hard to give them a truss package that's easy to work with, and sometimes we don't know what they're up against. So I'm just clarifying that so that anyone that's listening to this doesn't think that we think any other way than with a lot of appreciation for the job that the guys do out on the job site. Yeah.
I've often thought of that. I sit at my desk and run a little mouse. They're up on top in the weather and in the sunlight or less, and trying to read that piece of paper, and it can be a challenge.
Yeah. So Okay, well, I've asked you guys a bunch of questions. I've learned a lot. It's been fun. What questions did I not ask you guys that is on your mind is just, good information that we could share and make builders or framers or anyone in the building industry that's working with a truss company, Truss Components, make their lives a little easier?
Well, there's one thing that I think William didn't explain as clearly, and it was a surprise to me as I re-entered this business after some 10 years away. The scheduling process isn't just like handing somebody a piece of paper and say, build this. He has to understand the sequence and organize the job in the shop that makes it go through the shop efficiently. And that's part of what makes a quality and controls cost. And while that isn't on the builder, I just want them to appreciate that that is a very technical aspect of this process that has really become sophisticated and enables us to provide a product more economically and more efficiently and higher quality. So,
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
That's pretty funny because I remember getting into the industry and I'm a truss builder. Go out there, hire the framer. We're building trusses, and then I always looked at it differently because I come from production background before I got here, and I'm like, this is production. Anyway, so as I've been around the industry, I've seen so much change in almost 20 years from just the concept. I mean, I don't even say I work for a truss company. I work for a building component manufacturer because that's what we are.
Yeah.
We are a manufacturer. So we have just in time. If I have a broken truss or if I need something, I can easily slip that truss into the flow and get it right back out. Whereas, it was a lot more difficult 10, 20 years ago to do that because you got all this stuff. Wait, that's all queued up there. We can't stop what we're doing now just to drop that in. Now, within a click of a mouse, we're rearranging the schedule and it doesn't slow production down at all with the automation that we have and everything else. So it's super important we get the good information. But on the other side of it, we do have abilities to produce quicker. And so having that good information helps.
Right. Would you like to make sure that your truss ordering experience is stress and hassle-free? We've got a guide in the description down below. You can click on the link and it will tell you how to order trusses and the entire process. So please click on that link below and let's make this as easy as it can be.